So, welcome to this evening's meeting, hosted by Wellbeing Economy Cymru. We're back with our monthly discussion forum, bringing together the wellbeing economy movement across Wales for what we hope are thought-provoking and inspiring and informative discussions every month on a range of different topics that we believe are drivers for the wellbeing economy here in Wales and beyond. And it's an exciting time to be in the wellbeing economy movement because we're really seeing new paradigms in how we consider wellbeing economics here in Wales. And the key point there is that we're seeing the wellbeing economy happening all around us here in Wales. And as the Wellbeing Economy Alliance National Hub, we feel we've got an important role to play in amplifying and shining a light on all the great work that's being done across Wales to build the wellbeing economy in the context of the mainstream economy. And our paradigm shift is that wellbeing economics is not just something to aspire to in the future. It's not just a vision for the future. It is happening now. And that in the decisions that we make, in the choices, in the way we think about our lives and our worth and our work and what we value and what the economy means to us, we can choose to participate in the wellbeing economy, where we move away from purely financial and monetary valuations towards a far broader and more holistic understanding of what an economy is for. And of course, our economy, the purpose of our economy should be surely to serve our well-being and to generate well-being for people and for the planet, for the living planet we depend on. So this evening's forum is really exciting for us because hopefully gathered today in this room are like-minded friends from across Wales and probably further afield too, who all believe, as we do, that another way is possible and that we need huge economic systems change to create the sustainable and flourishing future that we all want. And hopefully in tonight's discussion, we'll be drawing on common threads across different movements, highlighting different aspects of the new economics movement across Wales, understanding how we all fit together: wellbeing economics, circular economy, foundational, regenerative. How do all these different threads fit together? And hopefully through this evening's discussion, shine a light on the way that different frameworks, different new economic thinking is guiding and shaping different behaviour in organisations and communities across Wales, but all in pursuit of hopefully similar and aligned ambitions for communities, for Wales, for the planet. So we've got a really fantastic panel that's going to bring those threads from different economic frameworks and paradigms into this evening's meeting. And we're also delighted that Jonathan Tench from the Future Generations Commissioner's Office here in Wales is joining to help me set some context for this evening's discussion and to provide a bit of an overview of the Future Generation Office's perspective on wellbeing economics here in Wales. Once Jonathan's spoken a bit, I'm delighted that we've got Hayley Richards talking about donut economics, Jenny Anderson talking about regenerative economics, and Dr. Katie Beverley talking about circular economics. So a jam-packed agenda for this evening. But Johnny, I'm going to come to you first. Thanks so much for being here. You are newly in role with a big remit around wellbeing economy in the Future Generations Commissioner's Office. So we're delighted to talk to you, and I expect all of this is right up your street at the moment in your thoughts about Wales's economic direction and your role in facilitating that. So yeah, thank you for coming along and tell us what you're up to. Thanks, Johnny.
Great. Thanks so much, Dawn. I'm not sure I can share my screen. I've got a disabled participant screen sharing thing, but I did have a few slides just to sort of help
There we
us.
go.
So, thank you so much. I'll just pull this up. Bear with me, everyone. Sorry. Uh,
Yeah, we can
struggling to
see
find. Yeah, you can see the slides.
we can see your slides, but they're not in present mode, but we can see them, so that's fine.
Great. Yeah, okay, great. Well, sorry, folks. I, for some reason, can't find my present mode. Um, anyway, I'm just
No
going to crack
problems.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invite. I'm Jonathan, and I've got a new role in the commissioners team, which is to lead our mission around a well-being economy. So really excited to hear from all the other speakers as well. So I thought what I could do is just set a little bit of framing in terms of the Well-being of Future Generations Act and our office's work in this area. So many of you will be familiar with the ins and outs of the legislation in Wales. So 7 wellbeing goals, legal duties on Welsh ministers and 48 public bodies, soon to be 56, to embed the Sustainable Development Principle and develop wellbeing plans. And there are 50 national wellbeing indicators there. And then our role in the Commissioner's Office is to advise public bodies on developing these wellbeing objectives. We do have a definition of a prosperous Wales under the wellbeing goals. I won't read all of this out. I'll pop it into the chat, but it talks about, a vision of a low carbon society using resources in the limits of environmental of the planet and developing a skilled, well-educated workforce with fair work principles. How is Wales doing in terms of well-being economy if we look at Wales's 50 national well-being indicators? I've just pulled out a few here. I won't read them all in detail. At national level, every year, Welsh Government tracks the number of people in Wales that are paid the real living wage. It's 68% as of 2022. But we are behind the Scots, who report up to 91%, and Scotland has the highest number of real living wage employers in the UK. So that's just an example of an indicator which helps us under the Future Generations Act to have a look at, are we making progress towards a well-being economy? Obviously, there's lots more that we would want to track, but that's one indicator that we could all maybe start to look at. How are we all sort of, moving in that direction and getting real living wage embedded across local, regional, and national economic strategies? There's a metric on the number of innovation active businesses as well. A challenge that I would like to make to Welsh Government is a business can report that it's making improvements on innovation. Is that actually innovation to help us in terms of sustainable development and people's well-being? So there are some metrics that I think we need to do some more work with Welsh Government around really establishing, are we really shifting towards a well-being economy? And then we have Wales's global footprint, which is measured not annually, but from time to time. And we are seeing a decrease in Wales's global footprint, but still, if every person in the world lived and used resources in the way that we do in Wales, we would require at least 2 planets. Something we've started to look at in our office is looking at, the 3 levels of who is writing and drafting and implementing economic strategies in Wales. So we have the Welsh Government Economic Mission. It has 4 priorities: foundational economy, net zero and just transition, skills and innovation. I'll talk a little bit more about foundational economy in a second. The Welsh Government's Economic Mission talks about using the Future Generations Act as a blueprint, and also that they will develop monitoring and evaluation framework for the Welsh Government's Economic Mission based on the Future Generations Act. Now, that's something I'd really like to work a lot more with Welsh Government officials on. At regional level, this is quite important because there's a lot of money going in here. So we've got four growth deals in Wales, and that's a lot of UK funding that comes into these growth deals. And these growth deals are merging with something called corporate joint committees, which will be the clusters of local councils within those growth deal areas. And those corporate joint committees, because we love setting up new frameworks and regional frameworks in Wales, these corporate joint committees will come under the Future Generations Act. So they will have to be developing wellbeing objectives. Now, those currently haven't been set, plans are in place for them, but that's something that our office will be looking at. It's very good for the Welsh Government to say they're using the Future Generations Act as a blueprint for their mission. Who's checking on whether the corporate joint committees are doing that? So there'll be, I think, emerging over the next few years, a real need to work in collaboration with many of you and other stakeholders around helping these corporate joint committees and growth deals embed well-being principles into their regional economic plans. Likewise, then at local levels, we have 22 local authorities all developing their own economic strategies. What I can see from having a look at how they're articulating well-being economy in their well-being plans is foundational economy, circular economy, skills, and tackling poverty are these 4 areas. What I'm really interested in is this growth of councils and public service boards talking about foundational economy and circular economy. It's a really good indication for us on the call that sort of alternative ways of looking beyond, business as usual, growth at all costs is starting to emerge at that local level. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then with business, so some of the work that I've been doing over the last year, I've worked with some large companies in Wales that are aligning their corporate strategies to Wales's wellbeing goals, Principality Oggi, Bluestone, Football Association Wales. But we are an economy of SMEs. And so something that I've been working on with Business Wales is a Future Generations toolkit for SMEs that access Business Wales services. That is not published yet. There's a little bit more work to do in terms of getting that on the Business Wales website, but it's important for us to remember that we can have brilliant public sector economic strategies, but if they're not figuring out how to leverage businesses in Wales to align to our wellbeing goals, we're only going to get half the way in terms of meeting our wellbeing goals. I'll try and speed up. I've just got 2 more slides for you. So in terms of what our office can do, we've set out Cymru Can, so our strategy, we set that in November last year, which is our priorities for Derek Walker, who's the new Future Generations Commissioner. A lot of involvement went into setting that strategy. Now what we're doing up until the end of March is setting out key performance indicators for our team along the 5 missions that we outlined. So wellbeing economy. We've said quite a bold mission here that we will make it our mission to help transition Wales to an economy that puts people and planet first. As a result, governments at all levels, businesses and communities are making this happen. I won't read out all of the text of the rest of the slide. I think what I'd like you to sort of leave with is what we're currently looking at and exploring is that the sort of outcomes we want to be looking at after 2-3 years is that local authorities, corporate joint committees are framing their economic strategies around a wellbeing economy and the Future Generations Act. We want to see that more businesses, including social enterprises, are incorporating the wellbeing goals in their business models. And we want to build a shared understanding across public bodies about measuring success in a wellbeing economy. There's lots more that I could talk about, but that focus is going to be on, local and regional kind of economic strategies. That's our current thinking anyway. From lots more conversations with you, we can have a look at whether you think those are the right priorities. My very last slide here is just on how we can work together. So absolutely critical to our success as an office, but actually that's not the important thing. The important thing is people's well-being, is working together. Something that I'm quite interested in exploring is the extent to which we could build from all of this energy within Wellbeing Economy Cymru and think about what's the kind of visible, vocal coalition that we want, and start to think about how do we collectively want to start shaping a shared manifesto to start influencing the next set of Senedd political party manifestos and the next programme for government. And I think we've got an opportunity up until 2026 to have a look at what could a really big coalition look like that is pooling policy and advocacy and campaign resources to be, really pushing this agenda on the wellbeing economy. Just really quickly, next year we will produce our 2025 report. Every 5 years, the Commissioner does a State of Wales update, and there is an obligation under the legislation for councils to adopt our recommendations in their wellbeing plans. So it will be really important to work with many of you on that. I'll speed up, sorry, I am taking a while. Concepts that I've been looking at in terms of supporting local authorities, there's great traction on foundational economy in Wales. It's really, really brilliant. Talking to the Welsh Government foundational economy team, 53 million in the last few years has flowed back into Wales after identifying procurement strategies that can retain buying goods and services within Wales. Fantastic effort. What I'm really interested in is this community wealth building concept that has been developed in Preston, North England, and Scotland. And what community wealth building is doing, which I think can build on foundational economy, is it talks about going beyond procurement. It's about involving communities in setting local strategies. It's about local campaigns for real living wage. It's about using council pension funds to invest in town regeneration. And it's about promoting not just local procurement, but what types of businesses do we want to be supporting? It's social enterprises, it's co-ops and employee-owned businesses. So I'll stop there, probably a bit of a scattergun approach there, but you can see some of the formulation of what we're trying to do here, but absolutely critical is working with all of you and with others on this agenda. So thank you, Dawn.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating and brilliant to see all that, Johnny, and so many things I could pick up on there. I mean, firstly, in terms of our framing tonight, and Johnny's set that out perfectly, is that, we're lucky enough here in Wales to be operating within an established framework, which is the 7 Wellbeing Goals and the Future Gen Act. And it creates this really useful shorthand in Wales for understanding what we mean by wellbeing economics. What is the wellbeing economy? We can, shorthand for all of that, we can say the wellbeing economy is an economy that operates in alignment with the 7 wellbeing goals as a framework and the 5 ways of working that are incorporated into the Act. So really interesting to see your work there in working with businesses that want to operate in accordance with that framework, and seeing how that can be embedded at all levels, government, regional, local authority. But yes, that gives us some great context to work in, and a great way of thinking about what wellbeing economics is. And it also, your presentation, I think, Johnny, highlights that, and I love Cymru Can as a hashtag here, it highlights that thinking in Wales is already incredibly progressive, in relation to the kind of global picture, perhaps. It's easy to revert to definitions of sort of economics that are not really radical and groundbreaking. But here in Wales, we're thinking in much more radical ways, and we're more comfortable with these concepts that you've outlined. And you said that already in Wales, we're articulating wellbeing economics in terms of foundational economics, circular economics, skills, and tackling poverty. And that we're going beyond just thinking about procurement, that we're thinking about community wealth building in all its radical, beautiful ways, not just procurement, and yet already doing well on procurement. Of course, all of us in the room will want so much more and see so much more potential for all of this across Wales. We're not getting everything right in any sense, but a really strong government mission there, embedding the wellbeing economic goals as a framework in the economic mission for Wales. I mean, it's just massive, and it's really important that we highlight how far ahead of the game and well on our way we are in Wales towards really strengthening and embedding wellbeing economics at every level. And as this movement continues to coalesce, and I think this evening's meeting is very much part of that coalescence of this movement. And you mentioned there the need for a strong voice for wellbeing economics, potentially a coalition that could come from among this movement and the groups represented here this evening, that we can be really supporting local authorities and national government with messaging around and responses that align with wellbeing economics, and a lot more clarity and innovation and highlighting great things that are happening across Wales to help all of us continue to develop our understanding of wellbeing economics. Because I think it might be easy for the idea of wellbeing economics to kind of fall into not be radical enough, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, that we need to continually challenge ourselves and listen to the fringes as well as at the centre. You know, what are some of the real ideas about how we bring to life a complete change in purpose for our economy, and a move away from GDP and other economic financial metrics towards those sorts of indicators that you were outlining. We're already tracking those here in Wales. And yeah, thinking how we take that work forward to track our progress, hold ourselves accountable, and measure the development of the wellbeing economy. So many threads to pick up on. Thank you, Johnny. But yeah, really great to have you here. And as you say, lots more conversations to have. But great to see wellbeing economy as one of the Future Generations Commissioner's 5 missions. And that gives us loads of opportunity to keep growing this movement here in Wales. And part of this movement is the great work that's being done at all levels across Wales, under a different banner, under a different name, but perhaps it's all the same stuff. Let's explore. We've got representatives here talking about, as I mentioned, a number of different economic frameworks, circular economics, regenerative economics, and one of our favourites, donut economics. And I will introduce Hayley Richards first of all to talk to us about donut economics. Hayley, as many of you will know, is a great friend to this group, was involved in the setting up of We Cymru in the very early days, and has been a passionate advocate for donut economics across Wales for very many years. She's head of programme development and policy at WCIA, experienced as a researcher and policy and advocacy officer at Oxfam Cymru, and she's also collaborated on the Wales Nation of Sanctuary campaign with the Wales Refugee Coalition, and positively influencing the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act through the Sustainable Development Alliance. And she's played a key role in introducing donut economics to Wales and is its key flag bearer. Thank you, Hayley, for being here. Talk to us, what is donut economics and how is it helping organisations and communities in Wales to think differently, to do things differently, and actually to implement wellbeing economics?
Thanks, Dawn. I'm just going to share some slides. Can everyone see that? Yep. So yeah, I'm kind of here wearing several different hats. As Dawn said, I work for the Welsh Centre for International Affairs. I work there 3 days a week. Very lucky that I can work 3 days a week. And the WCIA is a charity that supports people to learn, to think, and to act on global issues, with the vision that everyone in Wales can contribute to a fairer and more peaceful world. We're particularly interested in the Globally Responsible Wales goal under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. I'm also here as a citizen of Pontypridd, of Wales and the world, and as someone who cares deeply about people and the planet, and as somebody who wants to be useful and do good things in my community. A bit of a disclaimer, I'm not an economist, so my love of donut economics started when I worked for Oxfam. I was very lucky to work for Oxfam when Kate Raworth worked there, and when she came to the conclusion that it was the broken economic system that was the root cause of many of the challenges we face in the 21st century. She came up with 7 principles of how we need to change our economic system, how we need to all be economists, and what this might look like. I'm not going to go through these the kind of crux of the problem, as she saw it, was that an economy built on growth at any cost was damaging to the planet, was damaging to people, because it didn't consider the externalities to that system. GDP measures only monetary value. So if that, if the economic system is broken, what Kate Raworth started doing was asking some questions. What is the economy actually for? What should the goal of the economy be? And what is our purpose? And she came up with this donut shape. It's a very visual depiction, which is very attention grabbing. And the goal is to leave no one facing critical human deprivation, so in the center of the donut, but at the same time to not overshoot critical planetary boundaries at the outer side of the donut, and the sweet spot in the center of the donut is the safe and just space for humanity to exist. And in terms of what the social foundation of the donut, or the social floor, looks like, that was developed from the Sustainable Development Goals, which every government in the world has signed up to, and every person on the planet has a claim to. And that includes here in Wales, because the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is actually built upon the Sustainable Development Goals. So that formed the inner ring of the donut, the social foundation, and the outer ring of the donut was informed by planetary boundaries, which were identified by Earth system scientists. And these are 9 critical life supporting systems that sustain life on Earth, which we cannot breach. So now Kate Raworth moved to go, which she calls the compass for human prosperity, from end growth, regardless of balance between the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. So if that's the goal, how are we doing on a global scale? The world is dangerously out of balance, as we know. The news today that we're tipping over the 1.5 degree Paris Agreement. So in terms of the social floor, you can see that billions of people worldwide are falling short on life's essentials. And at the same time, this diagram is out of date. We're overshooting 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries, which are critical to life on Earth. That's the global picture. In Wales, similar picture. This is data from 2019 and was developed as a donut data snapshot for Wales by Oxfam Cymru in collaboration with the Anti-Poverty Coalition and Wales Environment Link. You can see many people in Wales falling short of life's essentials, and also many of the planetary boundaries breached. This includes land conversion, which was breached by 200%, and climate change, which was breached by 450%. And that's because the planetary boundary doesn't only measure direct carbon emissions from Wales, but it also measures indirect emissions that are produced overseas because of our consumption habits here in Wales. Where else is the donut being used? Natural Resources Wales in 2020 used a map of the donut against the wellbeing goals in their State of Nature and Natural Resources report. Banau Brycheiniog National Park was the first national park in the world to use the donut in their policy and action planning. But that's kind of large-scale use of the donut in Wales. How can we, on this call, how can we all help bring humanity into the donut? How can we bring this thinking into our spaces? So there are new tools now called Donut Unrolled, which unrolls the donut, and that produces 4 lenses through which we can explore in more detail. So I live in Pontypridd, and by unrolling the donut, we can look at how Pontypridd can deliver on its local aspirations, but at the same time recognising its global responsibilities. So the unrolled donut creates this deep dive space to explore explore, the big question: how can our places become a home to thriving people in a thriving place, but respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? So in terms of kind of bringing this into life, then on the social foundation, how can all the people of Pontypridd thrive? How can all the people of Pontypridd have a good life? How can they have, enough food, enough water, enough housing? So it's all the dimensions of the social foundation from the Sustainable Development Goals, but it also brings in community, culture, history, equality, diversity, inclusion, because all these things matter in our local places. The local ecology lens: how can Ponty be as generous as nearby nature? Uses biomimicry thinking. So we use nature as a mentor, as the method, and as the measure of what we should be aiming for. We should be learning from the generosity of nature's genius in our local places. And then every place is connected to the world through global supply chains, for example. So we have an impact here on the health of the whole planet, on the planetary boundaries through our consumption impacts, but also on the well-being of people in other places. We need to think about who picked and packed the food that we eat, who sewed the clothes that we wear, who assembled the phones that we use, and what were the conditions that they were working in, and what was the pay that they were receiving. What are the impacts on our lifestyles on people in other countries? And also, who is coming here from other places, and what kind of welcome do they get when they come here? And how can we build solidarity and connection and respect to enhance the lives, not just of people in our places, but of people worldwide? And through exploring deeply in each of these four lenses, we can look at the interconnections between the four lenses and develop a rich portrait of our places. The magic happens when we start to interweave between those four lenses. I'll finish there. There's lots more we could say. As Dawn said, in the kind of early days of the Wellbeing Economy Cymru, there was a fantastic event which brought in the Future Generations Commissioner at the time, Sophie Howe, and Catherine Trebek from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and Kate Rayworth. There's a couple of other things there. We've got, in the local place where I live in Pontypridd, we've actually got a donut economics book club. I saw Marcus on the call, he's part of our book club. And last night, despite the fact that, it was lashing down with rain, there was a group of people who went out in the rain to chat together about the economy. I would never have thought that would happen in a small place like Pontypridd, but it did. So, and in terms of the unrolling of the donut, the best place to look, and I'll put a link in the chat. There's a fan Birmingham. They've fully unrolled the donut and engaged with their local community to develop a portrait of their place and a direction of travel for the future. So it's well worth having a look at that story that I'll stick in the chat.
Wow, thank you, Hayley. Really, really great presentation, and so exciting to see clearly the work you're doing in Pontypridd, but also how donut economics as a framework, as a really neat framework that has gained a huge amount of traction, is really helping people implement wellbeing economics, or think through their places, or think through organizations through that really helpful lens. And it obviously struck me as you were speaking there that so much of the language that you're using is exactly the same language that we're using in the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, around, particularly at the beginning where you were saying it was Kate Rayworth's insight that our existing economic system is the root cause of our social and environmental problems, and that's absolutely what we think at Wellbeing Economy Alliance, that we must change the roots of our economy to bring about the changes that we need. But yes, really brilliant to see that how that framework is being implemented here in Wales, and also I'm sure our following speakers will pick up on some of the common threads between all these different and complementary and powerful frameworks. But I will move us straight on. Thank you so much, Hayley. Inspiring as always. We're delighted to have Jenny Anderson on our discussion panel tonight. And Jenny, you'll have plenty to reflect on already from the discussion so far. Jenny is a regenerative strategist and co-founder of the Really Regenerative Centre. And she walks side by side with brands, organisations, cities and municipalities who want to be part of the movement to create a regenerative economy. So her work centres on the unique stories of people and place which set and sustain vision to travel to tomorrow's regenerative future. And Jenny's worked closely with WWF Cymru to help build a pilot project in Pembrokeshire, which we'd love to hear about. Jenny, thank you for being on our panel and welcome. Right, sorry, I'm going to need you to.
I did. I hope. Can you hear me?
Lovely. Yes, great. Okay. Welcome,
Sorry,
Jenny.
I excitedly started talking and have forgotten to unmute myself. It's great to be here, and thanks very much for inviting me. Can I just be really practical and check with you, Dawn? How long am I to speak for? Because I thought I was. I slightly misunderstood. I think I thought I was to introduce myself for 3 minutes and participate in a panel discussion. So I haven't produced a beautiful presentation for you, but I do have a number of slides I could share. So I just want to check on time.
Well, we would love to hear from you for around 10 minutes if you've got enough to fill that sort of time, Jenny. That would be lovely.
I can talk for 10 hours, but, sure. But I'll try to keep it short. Okay. I think perhaps the most important thing to share, I'll share a little bit of background about Really Regenerative first. So we're an educator primarily and a resource centre working not just in the UK, but in many different parts of the world to help organisations and people bring a regenerative economy into being. Our open signature learning journey that you can see behind me, that is called Power of Place, has taken probably more than 500 different organisations over the last 3 years through a 9-month programme, which is designed to help people create resilient regenerative projects across the UK, Europe, the USA, South America, and now Asia too. So we work directly with organisations to support learning and development transition to regenerative design. And that really means we work holistically from place to incorporate not just economy, but also culture and the living systems ecology in all our work. So we've worked with private states in Scotland to shape potential for a regenerative food system, municipalities in Thailand to incorporate tourism, food production and economy, organisations like the Crown Estate, WWF Cymru that you mentioned. I think I saw Jess McQuaid on the call, so I might call on her in a second. But our aim is to help realign economic and cultural systems we currently have back towards the living systems principles that have sustained life on Earth for 3.8 billion years, and which, I guess until relatively recently, only Indigenous peoples have really understood and stewarded. But our challenge today is how we transform the systems from the extractive and degenerative processes that are well documented and well talked about in donut economics as a framework and well-being economics, at how we change those processes that have destabilized planetary boundaries, but do that in the context of a highly technological age that we live in and the challenges faced by being in the middle of a polycrisis, where the degree of complexity that we're dealing with demands radical collaboration and a meta-technology that matches the demands of the transformation we need to make. So for us at Really Regenerative, that's something that we describe as regenerative design and development principles. that create the conditions for life to continue, and interpret those in the conditions of the 21st century. So core to our work is doing that from place, not only because that's generally the scale, bioregional and ecosystemic, at which life designs on Earth, but it's also at a scale at which complexity is manageable. And that can be places very fractal. It can be at the scale of a bioregion, but also at the human scale of municipality, city, town, down to neighborhood. And it can be also national, providing that we understand that natural systems don't respect arbitrary human political boundaries. And I think something quite important is about the question of different frameworks. So I think it's important to acknowledge that however any of us on this call describe ourselves, and whatever the differences in approaches, we're all here because we're working towards the same thing, which is a future in which we have turned around the impacts of our current economic model on the living systems of which we're part and on which humans depend, and on human cultures where globally we're seeing increased human physical and mental ill health and inequity continuing to polarize. That, I think, is what we all want on this call. And also that we are doing it in the context of a global polycrisis. So moving towards a regenerative future for us means looking at economy, ecology, and culture as one holistic living system that is intertwined and interdependent. So it means taking our existing ways of thinking, working, and designing and realigning them to those living systems principles in an age where we have perhaps first to reverse and restore some systems before they can shift to a regenerative state, particularly ecological systems, but also economic and cultural systems. So anything that is trying to do that in Wales is contributing to a regenerative future. So can I share some slides quickly?
Yes, please. Yeah, lovely.
I have the power. Okay, let's try this. I have so many slides open. Play from current slide. So one of the things I think that is valuable to share about a regenerative approach to economic design, cultural design, ecological restoration is that actually for 99% of Homo sapiens existence on Earth, we lived as a species in alignment with life's principles. It's only really very recently in our recent history, 150 to 300 years maximum, that we have started to design economies and cultures that are out of alignment with living systems principles. And we look at the core root causes of why that is in order to be able to design the change. And one of the things that underpins where things are going wrong is what we would describe as a story of separation that is enormously historic. That might be well expressed by the notion, the idea, I am greater than you, you are less than me. Whether that is as the relationship between humans and nature, where for such a long time now we have seen ourselves as separate from nature, and that nature exists as a resource to deplete and use for the benefit of the human system, or whether that's looking at human relationships through a hierarchical and competitive lens, where all sorts of isms arrive, from racism through to genderism. That story of separation is something that in the regenerative movement, we look deeply at to heal. And I guess a foundational belief of the regenerative field is that even though humans as a species have perhaps gone beyond their evolutionary purpose, that we do actually have a really powerful role to play in catalyzing the dynamic systems of life on Earth. And again, for us at Really Regenerative, we think to remember that role and rediscover that role is really best done in a alignment and through a relationship with place. So all of our work is really deeply centered from place, whatever that fractal scale of place might be. So here in front of you are my colleague. Actually, she probably have invited the lovely John Fullerton, because he is definitely an economist, whereas I am a place source designer. But I'll share his principles. You can take a screen grab of this because they're really important. He's somebody, I think, that has defined very well what the underlying principles of a regenerative economy should be. So feel free to take a screen grab of that, and I'll just quickly try and speak to those before I stop talking. So I guess it starts with a core idea that the human economy is a living system, although it's an unhealthy one today, and that there are universal patterns and principles, so first principles that can define and describe the qualities and tendencies of how life works. So the first being in right relationship. Humanity is an integral part of the connected web of life, and there's no real separation between us and nature. So the scale of human economy matters in relation to the biosphere in which it's embedded. We're all connected to one another, and damage to any part of that web of life ripples back to harm to every other part. So the principles of reciprocity and mutualism that are found in nature and in biology and in indigenous wisdom are foundational to a regenerative economy. And I think what was interesting, I heard you talk about the work in Scotland, certainly in Fife, that I have been part of, that it's looking at community wealth building in a very different way as part of the well-being economy, and the regenerative economy is no different. These are essentially really, I think, just differences in words and language, but not in meaning. So views true wealth as not about money in the bank. That it needs to be defined in terms of the well-being of the whole, and can really only be achieved by harmonization of multiple kinds of wealth or capital, if that's normal economic language, but that all of the forms of social capital, cultural capital rest on the foundation of healthy natural capital, and particularly healthy ecosystems. That a regenerative economy should be innovative, adaptive, and responsive. I hope that we would all agree on that it must somehow be channeled in a way that is responsive to the changing dynamics and essential needs of systemic health, both human and ecological, rather than short-term individual desires or wants or greed. Empowered participation, I think, is different perhaps from inclusiveness. Empowered participation, I suppose, I think means all parts must be in relationship with the larger whole in which they're embedded, to empower them to work for their own unique biocultural needs. Every single place has a unique biocultural footprint, and its economy, its culture should be, human economy and culture should be designed from that biocultural uniqueness. In other words, it honors community and place by working on the patterns and essence of individual history and place. Edge effect abundance is really about designing an economy that makes space for truly transformative innovation. And that there are opportunities for that innovation and cross-fertilization to happen, which almost always happens on the edges of cultures. A robust circular flow aligns very well with the circular economy and the well-being economy. I think that human health depends on the robust circulation of lots of things beyond money: oxygen, nutrients, flows of energy, materials in a circular fashion, where waste is food in all biological systems. And finally, that it seeks balance. So being in dynamic balance is essential to systems health. And achieving that kind of harmony requires us to deeply change our thinking and balance the sort of paradoxes of both and, rather than thinking in simple polarities like either or. I'm going to stop there because I could continue talking for, I was going to say talking for England, but talking for Wales in this case. And I'm happy to try and answer any questions that come.
Well, I could certainly continue listening for a long time there, Jenny. That was absolutely wonderful. And I have to say that's very enriching. The language you've used there, the way you've talked about the economy and our role in life as catalyzing the dynamic systems of life on Earth. Everything you have said, I think, for someone who's been actively talking about well-being economics for a long time, it's landed with me as being sort of deeply enriching and kind of healing language that you use to talk about our economy and our relationship with the dynamic living systems, and also the focus on place-based action and empowerment comes through really strongly, and that's something that I'm passionate about, and I think many of us here in the room take the view that our power rests at a local level.
I'm very excited about WWF Cymru's pilot project that is taking place in Pembrokeshire that we've been working with, where it's a huge NGO, but it is really looking at how do we bring together culture, economy, and ecology together. Just as a really simple example, seaweed has enormous regenerative potentials for soil. We could farm seaweed, but that is taking a mechanistic approach to seaweed. But we could in an interim process, farm seaweed, but create a new very hyper-local economy around that, producing enough organic seaweed to change the use of fertilizer in the food system in Wales, and eventually find ways for seaweed to regenerate, to be grown in the landscape such that it also regenerates ocean health at the same time. And that's a really radical way of looking at integrating ecology, economy, and culture. So I'm really excited about it. I hope I haven't said too much about it, because I don't think it has been officially launched yet.
No, heard it first here. That does sound really great work and very exciting to hear about, and a lovely example, certainly, of how, and as you've said throughout your presentation, how aligned we all are. We're using different language, and many of us using very circular looking frameworks. That's certainly a commonality. And all, striving for the same thing, but with, just slight differences in our language, but very, very interesting and exciting to pull us all into this room, I think, because we're picking up on each other's language and picking up on little nuances of different emphasis, and clearly stronger, all of us together in this room. So that's really great. Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm sure there will be discussion points and questions coming from the wider group shortly. So hopefully we'll bring you back in before the evening is out. But thank you so much for shedding a light for us on regenerative economics and some exciting regenerative projects happening here in Wales as well. I'll move on in the interest of keeping to time. We have our final speaker of this evening is Dr. Katie Beverley. Come in now, Katie, if you need to test your sound, because I think there may be a challenge on your audio.
Hi, Dawn. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. That's great.
You can. Oh, that's the best thing.
Oh, yeah, you've been panicking because Katie's sound was not working before the meeting, so she's somehow fixed it while we've all been talking. So huge sigh of relief from Katie and myself there. But Katie is Senior Research Officer at PDR International Centre for Design and Research in Cardiff Metropolitan University, and she's head of the Eco Design Centre and a key part of the Wales delivery team for Circular Economy Innovation Community. That's a really exciting project, which I myself am currently enrolled in here in Swansea. So we'd love to hear from Katie about how circular economy principles are being adopted throughout Wales, how circular economics as a framework is helping organisations, places, businesses think and work differently, and whether you agree, Katie, that circular economics is just part and another framework and another part of a broader movement, a new economy movement here in Wales. Katie, welcome.
Thanks, Dawn. And firstly, apologies for two reasons. Firstly, you can't see me because my camera is refusing to work. And secondly, I am in a public environment, so you may hear background noise. So I apologize if you hear music and everything else that's going on in the background. So other than that, I'm really glad to be here. And just like Jenny before, I don't have any slides prepared. So I'm just happy to chat my way through this. And a final apology, because I feel like I'm a little bit of a fraud in this situation, because very early in my career, when circular economy first became a conversation that we had, somebody asked me, is circular economy enough? And my answer then was no. And my answer remains no. So we've had a lot of conversations about these different kinds of economies. Circular economy is an underpinning philosophy that should lie beneath these economies. One of the challenges we have as circular economy people is that it's very recognizable when you have a carbon impact or a social impact from something that you do directly. What's not very apparent is what happens when you do something that's indirect. It's not always hugely apparent what happens in your supply chain. It's not always hugely apparent how your supply chain acts in your carbon footprint. It's not always incredibly apparent how it acts in your social footprint. And I think the social footprint is a really important thing to raise here, because often when we think about the circular economy, we think about it as being just about how we stop recycling and how we make sure we use our resources, but that's just not enough. So to me, I work quite closely with Welsh Government, and we have a conversation in Welsh Government quite regularly about this. And one of my colleagues, one of my I would say colleague, but actually I think one of my circular heroes in this works in Welsh Government, and he regularly says to me, we don't need an economy we don't need a circular economy. We need an economy that is circular, which means when we're thinking about what Jonathan was saying earlier about the idea of a foundational economy and a circular economy, they're not separate, but a foundational economy should be built on principles that allow it to become circular, because materials flows get hidden because we often think about our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So we need to encourage people to think very much about those emissions that are hidden. When we talk about social value, we need to talk about social value that is very much related not only to how we exchange and benefit from what we do, but how we stop the disbenefits of the material flows that we're extracting from the planet. So to me, I feel slightly fraudulent, because I feel like I want to look at a donut economic system. I want to look at a regenerative economic system, but I want to make sure that the principles of circular economy, which are not always transparent, are embedded within that. So I suppose I came to being a circular economy person being a designer, so I started out as a designer. I came into eco-design. And the first time anybody asked me, is the circular economy enough, was when it was chipping into the concept of eco-design, which was thinking about resources throughout a product life cycle. So we were very much focused on individual products at that time. And my answer then was no, it's not, because materials are not the only inputs into those systems. When it moved to discussions on a sector level, I said exactly the same. It's still not enough because sectors need to think about their bigger impacts. But equally, as a circular economy, we can be much more effective if we worked at sector level on how much material flows through our systems. And then we move to a regional level, it's certainly not enough. But everything that underpins a regional or a national economy should include the benefits of a circular economy, which are really about understanding that we cannot continue to extract the amount of materials that we do and expect the economy to balance that out. And we, at the moment, my biggest challenge at the moment is to talk about the idea of a carbon economy or a low carbon economy, because to a great extent, a low carbon economy is based on the idea that we can extract the materials that will allow us to be low carbon. And we can't continue to do that. And we certainly can't continue to do that and consider the well-being of the people who are involved in that whole system. So I suppose based on that, my final statement in this conversation is just that the circular economy will only work if the rest of the economy is regenerative and focused on well-being, because beyond that, the circular economy will only contribute to us continuing to focus on economic growth. And I don't believe that's the right way we should go. So I'm very short and I'm going to stop there.
Very interesting and thought-provoking contribution there, Katie. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting that some of our discussions about economics are more radical than others, and it's certainly true, probably, of circular economics. That it has been co-opted to a large extent by business as usual as a framework to some extent greenify processes and ways of life that are fundamentally unsustainable, degenerative perhaps. And so, yes, it can certainly feel very narrow in its scope if we're just talking about material flows and recycling and reuse within the context of an economic system that's fundamentally so problematic. So yeah, I really appreciate your lens on that. And there are ways of thinking about circular economics which are far broader and which do bring in some of those people, relationship, regenerative ideas that have been picked up on by other speakers. But when we're thinking too narrowly, I agree, we're not really getting to the root of our problems.
Absolutely, Dawn. I totally agree with you that we can think about the circular economy much more broadly than that. And that's what we try to encourage when we work a lot with public and third sector organizations through our program, Circular Economy Innovation Communities. And when we're talking about that, we actually use the well-being of future generations to conceptualize value. So when we describe the circular economy, we talk about the idea of creating value through the effective use of materials or resources. And what we mean by that is we say, well, materials and resources can be physical or they can be human, they can be all of those things. But also the effective use is really about how you manage all of those things together. But when we talk about value, we say, well, value is every one of those 7 goals. If you're contributing to one of those 7 goals, you're creating value. So in many ways, I feel like the approach we take to circular economy is far more a donut approach. And if I had to say which is the right way to go, I would 100% say, let's do donut, but let's underpin it by saying we understand what circular is. Because I think the complexity of circular is the issue. It's what does it mean to minimize your scope 3 emissions? What does it mean to use your resources effectively? And if we don't have that embedded, then we miss out on a huge amount of value the other forms of economy can create.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to hear. Yes, great to hear your insights on all of that. And I'll be really keen to hear questions and comments from the wider group that's joining us this evening. So hopefully we can bring you in again, Katie, as well. But I'm looking for raised hands and questions coming through from the group, reflections on what we've discussed. I think, as Katie said, the broader vision of what our economy needs to be underpinned, for example, by circularity, but it also needs to be regenerative and foundational and greener, and all of that is contributing to our well-being. So are we all talking about the same thing? How can we strengthen our impact and our movement by better understanding of each other's principles, or involving each other's frameworks in our discussions and in our work? I'd love to hear reflections from the group, and still waiting for some waving hands. Sue, thank you. Nice to have you with us. Yes, please.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, it's very interesting discussion and presentations, really enjoying them. My question is, it applies particularly to Swansea, but I think it's actually applies across Wales, which is that the language of climate and biodiversity emergency is in all the wellbeing plans, all the PSBs, as well as in the Welsh Government. But when you look at what they're actually doing, those plans are not being implemented. They're like a smokescreen for the status quo. I really feel it's greenwashing, and because we've been campaigning very hard against the Skyline development, because whilst they're espousing all this rhetoric on green policies, they're definitely not putting the interests of the planet, the country, or the city at the forefront of their thinking. And I just feel that a lot of, I love the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, and it has led people to declare emergencies and write their new policies. But actually, when you look at what's happening on the ground, I feel they're wolves in sheep's clothing, I'm afraid. I wonder what other people thought.
Yeah, that's a real challenge there. And, it's certainly true what Johnny was saying about the need for well-being economic thinking to be properly embedded and implemented, not just in the rhetoric at a national level, but at the implementation levels at local authority, regional authority level. Yes, I'll be interested to hear others' thoughts as well. Thanks, Sue. Marcus.
Thanks, Dawn. I thoroughly enjoyed all of those presentations, but then I'm kind of totally sold, as I suspect many people in this room are. But the problem that we have is, if you're not in this room, or if you're not sold, the arguments put forward by big business and by globalization can be really convincing to a great many people. So I've kind of struggled with how you get from one to the other. So I'm going to put into the chat a plug for it's a short book. It's a great book and it describes in great detail, well, not great detail, poignantly, harrowingly, as I've said there, how you get from this idea that the Western concept of development is good for nations. She started in the Ladakh, a region I'd been to twice for my shame, back in my heavy carbon footprint days. And I saw myself how the culture had just disintegrated. And Helena Norberg Hodge describes that in great detail. She started off as a translator for a German film crew who went into Ladakh in those days, 1975, I think, put there. But she's now one of the leading figures in globalization, in anti-globalization, in sustainability, up there with Joseph Stiglitz. So thoroughly recommend her book. And as I say, it's quite short and a really easy read. And thank you again to the speakers. Fantastic.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting read. And certainly we can look around us, I think, across our communities and see the impacts of globalization. But I think your first point there is that some of us are kind of tuned in to the impacts of our mainstream economy on our well-being and the well-being of the planet. And so many others don't see that another way is possible and can't perhaps see the wood for the trees, recognizing that so much of our economic system is choices that are being made by powerful people, and different choices could be made. Akmal, lovely to have you here. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. What a wonderful evening and a wonderful lineup of speakers. It's been very impressive, enlightening. There's a few questions or observations that I wanted to share. In terms of the underpinning, which I understood today is driven by our Future Generations Act, which Jonathan explained very well, and the SDGs. Now, I have been following what was developed a couple of years ago by Michael Porter and Michael Green at Harvard University, what they called it a social progress index. And I was impressed when you said that GDP is not the barometer of progress. So it needs to be something else. And that is basically looking at the three areas of social progress, which is addressing basic human needs, the foundations of well-being, which some of the panel members have mentioned, and also about the opportunity. So whilst I was listening, what I was thinking is that whilst we have a prosperous Wales, which could be an objective, but also the outcome of the two further objectives that we have in our Future Generations Act, which is a more equal Wales and a cohesive Wales, a cohesive communities together. And in all these presentations that we said, I think I didn't hear inclusivity or diversity, or how we can bring the two major key areas of SDGs and other, which is poverty, social and economic inequality. And I was just kind of wondering that in all of this economics, different kinds of lenses that we have heard today, how can we bring our 3.5 or 3.6 million people together, which is not a very big challenge? And what is keeping us or stopping us to be able to bridge this divide? We have people who are homeless. We have people who are still in the food banks. Depending on that, the cost of living crisis. the inequalities that we see among our communities, you know, Black and minority ethnic communities, and including the sort of the less privileged communities in our valleys and other places. So I was just kind of thinking that what is exactly the sort of the areas, I mean, the circular economy, the regenerative economy, the donut economy, I mean, more or less they're coming off the same, but I'm looking at the impact. I mean, how can we create something which we you know, want to bridge this gap by which we can connect the haves towards the have-nots? And at ACF, the Sadakat Community Finance, we've got a financial model which is very much innovative, and we call ourselves as disruptive innovators in the financial industry. But I wanted to hear more, if any panel member can address some of my concerns for our economy in Wales to bridge these wide gaps, which are really becoming even wider. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that. That is another thought-provoking contribution. And I think that's a key challenge, isn't it, for our movement? You know, we might say that we are the bubble of passion in this room. And how do we address the challenges of poverty, and how do we really speak to the needs that people have in Wales? I saw your hand go up, Jenny, while Akmal was speaking, and I would welcome your response to his question, and then I'll come to Vicky.
Akmal, I don't know that I can offer you an answer. I would love to be able to. But I think I put in the chat something that I think I'm just going to quickly see if I can share my screen again, because I think it's worth looking at. Has everybody ever looked at this flow model? It's quite old now. It was developed by a marvelous systems thinker called Fritjof Capra, and I think it really highlights the source of many of the challenges that you highlighted there, poverty being one of them. You can probably see it here. What is it that increases poverty? Many different things: social inequality, exclusion, demographic pressure. Certainly, what encourages social exclusion and social inequality? Capitalism. What drives capitalism? Economic growth. What drives economic growth? The idea of economic growth, the belief in unlimited economic growth on a finite planet. If we look at resource depletion, what drives resource depletion? Excessive consumption. Excessive consumption is driven by economic growth. Economic growth is driven by a belief in unlimited economic growth. So I think underpinning your question, Ahmed, is with all of the will and energy in this room, with all of the efforts that many of us and beyond this room are making, where's the change? Why doesn't change actually happen? And there are probably two things perhaps to say about that. Change is happening, but we are in the middle of a very dominant global economic system that by and large controls access to information. So it's incredibly hard for the average person to get access to information about all of the wonderful projects and transformation that is actually happening out there. The second thing about the dominant economic culture and the dominant cultural model is that it has had a considerable number of years to perfect its system. That's why it's dominant. And the system that is emerging in this room is very young, it's green, it's a new shoot. And perhaps the last thing to say is that transformative change, deep systemic transformative change, takes longer than we think that it does. I'm not sure, wave your hands at me if anyone in the room is familiar with a beautiful framework called the Three Horizons Framework of Innovation from International Futures Forum. If not, I'll put a link in the room. It's a really good way at looking at the emergence of transformative change in new systems. So we are as yet a fragile green shoot, but more powerful than we think we are and growing all the time. It's merely that we are fighting for the first time, fighting is a wrong word, struggling against a very powerful, entrenched way of thinking. And for us in the regenerative design and development movement, one of the critical nodes on which to act, which could be transformative across the systems, is intentionally working hard to change the way we think about how life works, because actually it might just not work the way we think it does. I'm sorry that doesn't answer the question about what you might do in Wales, but a really
Jenny,
inspirational story, to look at is how the Nordic countries transformed themselves over a 100-year period from the 1900s to the early 60s and 70s. Which was
Thank you, Jenny. I'm going to move us on because I'm really keen to hear from these other four hands in the room, and I want to be respectful of time, but we'd love to explore all these ideas at much greater length. Thank you, Jenny. Vicky, please do come in. Are you finding your unmute button there?
Sorry. Yeah, I've just found unmute. Yeah. So echoing what many have said, seems to be a dissonance between the high and grand ideas, which are large and full of beautiful aspirations and large words and generalities, and the specifics on the ground where people actually bump up against realities such as regulations and planning, and also there's very little awareness among. We have a small business economy in Wales, predominantly, with a few large employers, large providers. And the small business economy, the microeconomy, is not aware, by and large, of this sort of conversation. But they are practicing it in everyday life, reconnecting to their resources and their communities and community-facing businesses, and rebuilding relationships and loyalties, and not making profit the sole driver, but their loyalty and connection to place and local resources. So all that sort of stuff is happening on the ground with no awareness, I find, to this sort of conversation. And this dissonance is a problem. And I feel a lot of the people speaking in the audience have reflected that gap in different ways. So I'd like to see that addressed. Things like, do the planning committees, are they aware of this vision and aspiration? Or the regulators? If so, why are they constantly preventing any progress from the ground up? And only large businesses can make any progress. Anyway, I won't ramble on, but you get the gist.
Yes,
it's down to detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Implementation at every level, and somehow making sure, a few points you've made, but I won't use up our precious time by echoing them, but thank you, Vicky. Ina, yes, please.
Hello there, good evening, thank you. First time I've attended this webinar, and I have to say it's absolutely uplifting, really is. The panel members, amazing. The thread, I'm probably going to be echoing to an extent some comments, but I want to talk about language on two different levels. There's commonality amongst the panel members in terms of the choice, the careful choice of language that they choose to use. My second point I want to make about language is to all panel members, thinking about wider members of society, how are we going to open up this conversation? I'm not asking to dumb it down, it's about opening up for me and making it more accessible. And some of the concepts sort of can, through careful choice of language, become more accessible. So that's the question I'd like to put to the panel. Thank you very much.
Yeah, super question. I think an overarching question for tonight. Thank you, Ina. Lee, I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, everyone. Really amazing stuff. My feeling or at least maybe an analogy I'd like to draw is what we faced with lead in petrol all those years ago, where had we left it to sort of capitalist models of like, let's let people decide, we'll inform them that they can or can't use lead in petrol, for sure we'd still be seeing loads of people use it. And what I wonder sometimes is how we remove the need for everyone to become so educated in everything and just at this critical juncture make the changes that we need to make in order that we don't poison ourselves to the point of not being able to exist here.
Thank you, Lee. Great to have you as always. And yeah, poignant thoughts. Mike.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just I wanted to give a positive message. Really, I first met Jonathan Porritt, who was in that time we were in the what they called the Ecology Party, and then we changed the name of the party to the Green Party to be in line with the Grünen in Germany. Anyway, I just want to. The message is still the same. What Jonathan used to give fantastic speeches all about the crazy model of GDP growth and how unsustainable, how unfair. And how unecological it is. And I think the message, what we're saying this evening, is exactly the same. So I think just keep banging away. You know, sometimes I've met Jonathan on many occasions, and I know he struggles to retain his sanity, and so have I. But I think I would encourage everybody with it's the right message. You know, growth. It's not sustainable. It's not going to be achieved. And you've now got Labour, Conservative and the Liberals all banging the same drum, how we can achieve more and more growth, more and more consumption. And you've got a global advertising industry, I saw this morning, that is now £400 billion a year, telling us what we need, if you know, how we should look, what we should wear, what we should do, and that you need all these things, whether you can afford them or not. So I think the message we're all talking about here this evening is 100% right. It was right 43 years ago, and it's still right today. And and we just got to try and get more politicians, more economists like Kate Raworth, and academics. A good one is Jason Hickel. He produced an excellent book, Less is More.
Yeah,
I just wanted to,
yeah, thank you, Mike.
Talking about it. Yeah, so just keep banging away, keeping the message, you know, and keep it positive.
But also somehow getting more strategic, I think, in how we cut through, because it's more urgent, isn't it? It's so urgent that we find a way to cut through and stop preaching to our bubble of passion, but somehow keep growing our bubble of passion and cutting through to those leading politicians. And yeah,
but we are right. We are saying the right thing. You know,
it's
good
like to be on the right side, but where is the change? Where is the change?
If other people don't believe us, well, they're crazy. You know, as Simon Kuznets said in 1934, you know, this GDP growth, and he formulated the GDP model. You know, and he knew it was crazy. It is unsustainable. He knew that in 1934, and he created the actual, you know, calculation.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, absolutely. We are very much all singing from the same hymn sheet, but our congregation is not big enough. Katie, final word from you would be welcomed. And I'm very conscious of time, so thinking about wrapping up the meeting. So thank you all for your patience. But Katie, yes, please.
I'm screaming to come in. Thank you very much for inviting me back. So for me, one of the things we're talking about a lot is this idea that we don't have action ourselves, but, you know, we can design our business models. We can design the way we work to incorporate these things that are externalized by national government. We certainly can do it. And what we need is a mindset in which people are willing to do that. And I realize that's a huge challenge. I'm sitting there as an academic and I sit and talk to businesses really regularly and they go, we really can't do that. And often you need a walk through how you can do that. But actually, we don't need to rely on government to bring in legislation. We don't need to rely on these things. We can internalize these things. In our business models, we can internalize them in the way we act, and we can internalize them in the communications we have with everybody who delivers value. So my takeaway message is, don't think you're on your own. Your entire value network is there with you. They're facing the same pressures you are. They're looking to do the same things as you are. You are in power of how you introduce social value through the environmental pressures they're under. So please do it. Please don't accept that you're the minor player in this, because power is changing in our value networks. It really is. And we can really change this thing from within. And I think that is the most important thing you could take away from this conversation.
Thank you for that positive and empowering call to action, Katie, and absolutely appreciate your focus on how we can internalize all of these things, and that change starts within us. But I am also excited about us grasping the potential for real government and big business action, and not giving up on that either. I think it's an empowering message. Thank you. Right, we're over time, but I'm a sucker for bringing people in who are desperate to speak. So Mark Temple, you've got literally half a minute, but I'd love to hear your voice if you're able to.
I'll do my best to limit myself to half a minute. It's my first time here, so if I'm saying something that's been said before, forgive me and tell me to shut up. I'm a retired NHS consultant, and when I started in 1979, NHS was place-based. It is now remotely based. How do we convert it back to being place-based? Because it will be cheaper, patients will be better, and it'll cost the nation, as in the global economy and the world, less. Because think of all the traveling around and the resources. We get stuff from Pakistan, we get stuff from China, which is used once and thrown away. When I was first diagnosed, I had 3 bottles to dispose of a week. I now have a big box to dispose of once a month.
Yes, well, applying the challenge to our NHS and how we can run the NHS in alignment with...
It's the biggest cost in Wales.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that into the room. We haven't talked enough about it, but clearly it is a key driver and a topic for another forum. Thank you for your contribution. And okay, final word of the night. Jess, I'll come to you, but again, 30 seconds or less. Thank you for being here. Are you able to unmute?
Yeah, it's just we're really keen to explore how we can implement this in practice. So anyone that's excited about having that opportunity, ideally to help with thinking, but also to help with delivery, we're working in specific areas at the moment based on our own analysis and fields of energy, but we're always open to other ideas and support. So I've put my email in there for people who want to engage.
Brilliant, thank you. There's some really great resources shared this evening, and that's another one. Thank you, Jess. And the chat and the recording will all be shared with everyone. So if you haven't managed to capture everything, there's been a lot of information flying around. We will circulate everything that we've discussed and shared this evening. Really stimulating discussion, part of an ongoing series of these forums where we're bringing people together from across Wales and beyond to really grapple with some of these big questions. And the conversation is maturing and the debate is becoming more sophisticated and more nuanced. And we often keep landing on similar challenges, which is actually how do we move this from debate and discussion to implementation and change at scale across Wales. But also it is happening. You know, we can focus on the things where the decisions that are being made that we don't agree with, that we are not aligned with, and that don't reflect the vision of a wellbeing economy for Wales. But we can also point to examples of where real change is happening at every level. And as Vicky said so rightly, so many of our businesses, particularly local, embedded SMEs and micro SMEs across Wales, they are already wellbeing economy. They're just not using that term. So how can we work together across all our various frameworks and languages and differences to come together and really push this agenda forward at each level in Wales? And I think Johnny's work will be really important for us all to pay attention to and collaborate and feed into the important work that the Future Generations Office is doing across the various lenses of embedding wellbeing economics across the country. So much to talk about, so much to continue discussing. It's the second Thursday of every month that we meet, and our next forum is on the topic of education, education for a wellbeing economy. So that is another big topic, and everyone is welcome to come and listen. The details are already up there on Eventbrite. We'll share the link with you all now that you're all on our mailing list. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for staying for these few extra minutes. I didn't want to cut anybody off. You're all welcome to unmute yourselves and say good night, and then I'll end the meeting in a few seconds. But thank you all for being here.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lovely
Thank
to
you
meet
to
you
our
all.
panel
Thank you.
and
Good
to all
night.
our
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Good
night,
night.
Everyone for your time. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you
Bye-bye.
all. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Don. Good night.